Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everyone to And She Thrived, which serves to hold space for Muslim divorced women. And we're now expanding our topics to serve women at large, covering topics on wellness and healing and spirituality. And we're very blessed today to have Hina Khan-Mukhtar with us. Assalamu alaikum, Hina, how are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I'm well. Thank you so much for having me.
We are so honored. So for those of you not familiar with Hina, Hina hails from the Bay Area, California, and she is a mother of 3 boys, and she is also an educator and a writer. She's written for the Muslim Observer as well as Seeker's Guidance. And apart from that, Hina, also you have an interest in interfaith dialogue, isn't that so?
Right, alhamdulillah, working with the local Jewish synagogues and churches in our area.
Mm-hmm. And also from what I've seen of you on social media, you seem to be quite the cook and chef as well.
I'm more of a baker and I love doing tea parties. Don't ask me to put on a 6-course meal. That's not me.
Okay. And so Hina has spoken extensively to large groups of people covering topics related to parenting and to marriage as well. So we're going to be starting off with marriage first of all. And my first question would be that why is it that we are not getting this right in terms of finding a suitable spouse that's leading to problematic marriages, relationships? And furthermore, what is it that we can do to ensure that our children are also making the right decision when it comes to finding a suitable spouse?
Mhm. Bismillah. There's a book that I really like to recommend to young couples or even older couples, anyone who's actually on the journey to find a spouse. And it's called I Only Want to Get Married Once. It's by a conservative Jewish author. Her name's Shana Levitan. Her last name is spelled Levitan. Her first name is Chana. And I thought that book was brilliant in that it breaks down the 10 topics that every couple should be discussing, the 10 questions they should be covering with one another before they get married, because it's so easy to be guided more by emotion and by what society tells you is important. By society, it usually means like popular culture, Hollywood, Bollywood, Lollywood, right? And nobody's really I don't want to talk in absolutes, but a lot of people are not thinking about what happens after the wedding day, like after the honeymoon period, and what is this going to look like 30 years down the road, and especially when you're younger. Like I often give this example that when I was engaged to my husband, um, and he was getting to know my family and my friends at that time, a lot of my 11-year-old, 12-year-old cousins would come up to me and tell me how much they loved him. And one of the reasons that they told me they loved him is because they said he's one of the few adults who would take the time to talk to them and get to know them and take an interest in them. And at that time, I remember I didn't care. I didn't care what my 11 and 12-year-old cousins were saying. I was more concerned about what my friends, my peers were saying. It didn't even matter to me what my parents' generation was saying. It was more about, do my friends think he's cool, and do my friends' husbands think he's cool? And but you fast forward 30 years, and now what I realize is what that was an indication of was, mashallah, what a good father he turned out to be, and how involved he was as a parent, alhamdulillah. And but that wasn't something I was looking for at that time. I wasn't looking for somebody who knew how to communicate with children. And so I think one of the struggles many people have is trying to figure out the difference between appreciating certain qualities in a person and loving them for the qualities that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recommend and value, and versus infatuation. So there's a big difference between the two. And so many times people go with feeling infatuated and thinking that that's what marriage is supposed to be, and that's what they're supposed to sustain, 24/7 moving forward. So I from talking to young people who are on this path of of trying to find somebody, to what I'm seeing is people don't really know who they are. A lot of people don't know who they are and what they need. And it's so important to be open to shura, to be open to getting advice and opinions from people who know you well and who can see what you need, and when maybe even you aren't realizing it. So I think those are the things I would narrow it down to, like not really having a good indication of what it is that you need to succeed in life and to help bring about a balance, and also um, consulting with people beyond just your generation about what a partner is bringing to the table, and if that's what's right for you. There's all sorts of factors, obviously, but those are probably two that I've been seeing.
Right. And I know that you have informally counseled many couples who've been struggling in their marriages, and you like to focus on tools rather than on the failure. So what kind of issues have you noticed that typically arise in marriages that are struggling, and how do you turn that ship around?
You know, what the probably the number one thing that I'm seeing organically, and I tell my children to do dua for this and to thank Allah if they have this, which is, unfortunately, many people struggle with the inability to self-reflect. And if anyone out there who's listening to this, or you or me, if any of us are the type who are able to hear criticisms about us ourselves, and to hear feedback, and to hear more than one person kind of say the same thing about us, and to think, okay, maybe I'm the common denominator, maybe there's something I need to work on regarding myself. That is a huge blessing if people are able to do that, because for the most part what I see is people aren't able to self-reflect. They're not able to take criticism. They get defensive, they go on the offensive, and we're the heroes of our own narratives, and we want to be told how great we are all the time. And so it's very hard when somebody holds up a mirror and shows us that maybe we're not perfect. And that's what marriage does. Marriage holds up a mirror and shows you what you need to work on, but you have to be willing to look at that mirror and be like, okay, this is what needs polishing, this is what needs refining. um it's whenever people are struggling in their marriages, I always say there's his truth, there's her truth, and then there's the truth. It's not ever, it's very rare that there's a clear good guy and a bad guy. Very rare. um so usually when there's physical abuse involved, then it's like, yeah, okay, that's a deal breaker. If somebody's physically abusing another, then it's clear that a person needs to get out. But other than that, most things, inshallah, can be worked on. So the ability to self-reflect and to take criticism, I think, is a huge thing that people need to be willing to bring to the table.
So can you state some of the things that you've seen that are
Um,
and the kind of advice you would give in that specific situation?
yeah, so I knew of a couple where literally, like, the people in my home, what they would say about the wife is that when she comes into a room, she lights it up, like just this really outgoing personality, really friendly, just the life of the party. And her husband obviously fell in love with that quality with her of her, and together they were a very dynamic couple, and everybody enjoyed being around them. And then one time she had me come over, and I did notice, I remember asking her, did you just move in? Like, I thought she had just moved into her apartment, but she had actually been living there for a few years. And the reason I thought she had just moved in is because, there was a lot of stuff lying out. There was things that looked like they needed to be put away. There were boxes. There was like piles of dishes in the sink. Like, it was pretty chaotic in her apartment. And it looked like somebody's in the midst of like moving in and getting set up. I didn't, I didn't think beyond that. But then later she took me into confidence and was telling me about some struggles she was having in her marriage. And what it came down to was that her husband wanted domestic bliss. He didn't just want the partying wife. He didn't just want the person to have fun with. He wanted a home where, you know, that it was calm and it was peaceful and it wasn't chaotic, and meals were cooked and things were picked up, and he was out working, she was home, they had a kid. And what she said to me is, she said to me that one of the things he said to her was, if I needed a clean undershirt, like, I know I couldn't rely on you to be able to get that for me, to be able to provide that for me, like a clean undershirt. And her response to him was, even a maid could do that. Like, what I give you is so much more than that. Like, you and I have a good time together. I'm like good to your family. I'm good to your friends. Like, you know, everybody enjoys our company. Like, that was her love language, right? Like, being there, as far as like talking and hanging out. But what he was trying to communicate was that he needed something else. So I actually, at that point, I was probably maybe 10, 15 years into my own marriage. I actually saw myself in her because I saw similar qualities between us. And I know my husband had also expressed certain requirements, or certain, wanting me to shape up in certain ways. And so I felt like what I was witnessing in her was like Allah guiding me to what I needed to work on on myself. So I really encouraged her, and I was like, come on, we can do this. It's like, and maybe she even talked to me because she saw herself in me. Um, but unfortunately she wasn't able to change. Like, she would try, and she said her husband even said to her, like, I know you're going to try for like a week, but then you're going to give up. And so she would try, and she would like get into the cooking the meals and and tidying up. She'd get her mom and sisters over to help her clean up the place, but then it would go back to how it was. And she was coming to me quite a bit to talk to me about her issues. And what I was seeing on social media was that she was out with her friends a lot. Like, she was going, she was flying to other states to celebrate people's birthdays and bridal showers and whatnot. And her husband was home with the kid. And I was just like, dude, your husband's telling you he's barely hanging on by a thread to your marriage. What are you doing leaving and going to another state to party? Unfortunately, it takes so much work to change. Whenever somebody tells me that another person has changed overnight, I don't believe them, and I've had people try to convince me, oh, he's a different person now, or oh, she's a different person now. Like, she went to this one class, or she moved away, or he moved away for 6 months and he's a totally different person now. I don't believe it, because it takes a lifetime to work on yourself. I mean, there's issues that I'm still working on myself from childhood, and it's a day-to-day struggle. Nobody changes overnight. But what I always tell people is, you're allowed to make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. It's part of being a human being. But what matters the most is what you do to repair after the mistake, right? Like, how you plan to grow, how you plan to change. And everybody can forgive mistakes. What they can't forgive is the same mistake being made again and again and again. And so that's why when my husband told me at that phase in our lives, 10, 12 years into our marriage, that he needed certain things from me that I needed to deliver on, I had to take that seriously, because if somebody's taking the time to talk to you about what they need, it behooves us to listen, because nobody else is going to come ring the warning bells for us.
Mhm. So what you've said echoes what I've read in many marriage books, that you can be the most charismatic, beautiful, fun woman that there is, but if you're not, for example, ironing his shirts and putting a meal on the table, it's not going to mean anything. So that's interesting. But when it comes to then change, so as you said, the person relapsed, so then it takes time to change. And then it requires having a spouse who's also then patient to support you in that period of growth and change, where one will jump off and slack off, right?
Yeah, yeah. No, definitely. It is a two-way street. And that's one thing I appreciated about my husband, because when he told me he needed more from me, after we had that conversation, he he would act like he never even saw the flaws, you know? And once he had the conversation, he didn't bring up the past mistakes. And then he would act like he didn't even see whatever was lacking in me, which would then allow me to kind of start to relapse again, because I would start to think that, you know, he's not noticing, or I'm getting away with it, or what I'm doing is good enough. So it was the second time that he talked to me about the same issues that I realized, no, this is serious. Like he's not blind. He does see, and he needs more, and I have to deliver. And so, alhamdulillah, you know, it, it took more than once for me to get it, but alhamdulillah, it didn't require him to say it 10, 12, 15 times, because there is an end to people's patience as well, you know, and so both parties have to realize that.
Have you seen issues between couples related to gender dynamics and roles? For example, the man not being very manly enough or the woman being too masculine?
Yeah, I've unfortunately, there's this whole thing going on in our society where men are being emasculated, and many men are, you know, they don't feel respected, and they don't feel like they're in charge, and so they feel like, well, okay, if I'm not needed, then I don't need to deliver. And so, you know, there's some basic needs that each gender needs from the other, and one of the primary needs women have, even if she's highly educated, even if she's really successful, even if she's earning a lot of money, she needs to know that her husband is capable, and that her husband can provide, and that if tomorrow she wasn't working and wasn't earning, that she would be in good hands, right? Like her husband would be able to take care of the family. And so I I I do see that if the husband isn't providing, then the wife loses respect. And probably the number one indicator that a marriage is on its way out, you know, on its way to being over, is when you see that a spouse is contemptuous of the other spouse, when you see that they're rolling their eyes when the spouse talks, or they're getting annoyed, or they don't respect them or don't agree with them, and openly contradict them, openly laugh at whatever they're saying, or, you know, put it down. Oh, that's, subhanallah, that's so painful to witness, because it's a very clear indication that this probably isn't going to survive, because it's very few people can tolerate that, can tolerate feeling like they're just being tolerated, you know?
Is this something that you see often?
Not often, but the few times that I have seen it, it's really stood out. Yeah, it's really stood out. And and I know that I, in my own marriage, have had to check myself about that, that if I have that internal voice telling me, oh, I don't like this or I don't like that about my partner, like really realizing like how detrimental that way of thinking is, and focusing on the things that I do appreciate and do respect. Because it first starts as a thought, but then it comes out in your body language, in your tone of voice, in your attitude, you know, towards your husband.
So jumping off that, I've heard you say in a previous lecture that you are more of like a tea and scone type of person, and your husband is more like a bagel and coffee kind of guy. And so, of course, it sounds as if you're quite different in many ways, and that you've also had periods in your marriage that were challenging. So I want to like delve a bit deeper about that. When those situations arose previously of conflict or tension, what did that feel like in your body, like in your soul? And then how would you or anybody else that you advise be able to navigate that discomfort and get out of that, turn that around, shift that energy?
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, things will obviously become rough or choppy or just plain boring in a marriage,
Mm-hmm.
assuming.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, my husband and I are actually very different. And I had to learn over time how to appreciate the differences, and to realize the strengths and the positivity and the beauty that he brings to the relationship, that is necessary, that I don't necessarily bring. Because I know for a fact that he does see what I bring to the table, and he's very appreciative of it. I was the one who had to do more of a shift, because it's I don't know if it's just my personality or maybe it's women, but we tend to think that um you have to do whatever I'm doing, right? And like only then is this like perfect or beautiful. It's when I'm getting exactly what I'm putting out. Um it showed up early in our marriage. It showed up in on our honeymoon actually. And it was we went to we did a tour, a cruise of the Greek islands on our honeymoon, and we went to the island of Santorini. And when we got off the ship, there was three ways of getting. So the town of Santorini is at the top of the island, and the ship comes at the bottom, and then you have to go up to this town that's, you know, those famous white buildings with the blue domes that are perched at the top. And the three ways to get to the top are you can either go by cable car, you can either hike, or you can go on donkeys. And I was really excited at the idea of going on donkeys, on mules. And I just thought it would be really cool. You've got this view of the sky and the ocean, and I know now, but at the time I didn't realize that my husband hates being on animals. Like he doesn't like riding camels or horses or donkeys. He's perfectly fine hiking. He's not interested in being on animals. They make him nervous and he finds them to be unpredictable. And it was, but he agreed to it. He agreed to going up to the top on a donkey so that, you know, we could enjoy the view of the ocean and the sky. I didn't realize at the time that how miserable he was and how much he didn't want to do it, but he did it to make his new bride happy. When after we enjoyed our day at the top and it was time to go back down, I wanted to go back down on the donkeys as well. And he was like, "No, I want to take the cable car." And I remember that was our first, like, I wanted it my way, and I didn't understand why we would take a boring cable car ride down when we could enjoy the donkeys. And so to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm this adventurous person, and he's not, you know, he's like, he's going to take the boring, safe route. And, and it was a big source of friction then. You know, you fast forward now and we go on vacation, we go to like Hawaii or we went to Jordan, and same thing came up where we had a choice of taking animals or walking. And I was a lot more compassionate towards him and a lot more understanding. And we found a way to find a compromise, you know, so that each of us could be happy. And at the same time, over the years, I've realized that quality in him to want to be safe and to not want to take risks, even though it might have been annoying and something that was recreational at the time, it's served me very well as far as, alhamdulillah, how we've lived our lives. And alhamdulillah, how the decisions he's made for us financially and whatnot. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. And so you you have to talk to yourself a lot to get yourself out of a certain detrimental way of thinking, you know? And that is where I think optimism plays a really big part, which is seeing the glass as half full. And a lot of people, instead of as half empty, and a lot of people, and in fact, I would take it one step further. Yeah, you want to see the glass as half full, but you want to just be grateful that you even have a glass, right? And a lot of people that I talk to that who I know are struggling, so much of it has to do with their perspective on life and on their situation and on their partner, and the inability to see that along with the things that may be irritating you and maybe making you even feel lonely because it's not what you need. It's, you know, you feel you need something more so that you don't feel lonely. um to realize that no, there's actually qualities here that give me a good life as well. And I just have to be willing to look at those points as well as the things that maybe, you know, frustrate me. Um, and then the other way to deal with it is that I found a way, I don't expect my husband, and this is what I tell young people, to fill every single well. And so maybe, you know, this isn't my case, but maybe if I needed somebody to do the recreational things with, because my husband doesn't want to, then finding a friend, a female friend, who, you know, I can do these things with and have these outings with and get that need fulfilled so that the things my husband is able to provide me, I can enjoy those with him, you know, instead of constantly feeling like my spouse should be everything.
Hmm. That I find, as you said, it's actually like an internal elevation of state. Because I've seen people who would say, yeah, okay, well, he's not a fun guy, so I'm just going to go on this girls trip with my friends. But still a resentment towards the spouse because he just
Yeah.
ain't the kind of guy, and I just have to
Yeah.
tolerate him, you know? And so I think what you're saying is to actually change one's internal state where you can genuinely appreciate the good and you're not resentful about those things you've got to fulfill from other.
Right.
And I see a lot of men also complain. Men have complained to me that they find in this day and age, women's expectations of what they want from a husband, it's just almost impossible to meet because it's like the companionship, it's the fun
Mhm.
part, the interesting part. You should be intelligent and erudite and
Mhm.
a good, with a good intimate life. You should cover everything, and they just find that it's just too much, and
Yeah.
maybe that goes the other way around as well. I think there are many men out there who also have unrealistic expectations from
Yeah.
wives. Hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one thing that I had said in the talk I gave the other day, which I think surprises people, is it's really beautiful if your husband or your wife is your best friend. It's very beautiful, and I wish that for everyone. But it's not necessarily the case. Like not every in every marriage, it's not going to be necessarily the case that the spouse is going to be your best friend. And by best friend meaning that they're the ones you want to do everything with, and they're the ones who like completely get you 100%, and they're the ones who give you what you need when you talk, that they're able to like listen to you in the way exactly that you want. You won't, and they're able to financially provide for you, and they're able to like help cook for with you, and they're able to help you raise your kids. And like, one person can't necessarily be everything. If you've got a partner with which you find all that, then that's beautiful, and you're very blessed, mashallah. But that's not going to be necessarily the case for everyone. But what you have to see is, um, what I do get from my partner, is it enough? Is it enough for me to live a productive, fruitful uh, life in which I'm content, you know, not even necessarily super happy, but content, that and see the blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And to also even imagine what the alternative could be. Like, if you weren't with your partner and if you didn't have this life, what would the alternative look like? Some people, they decide the alternative would be a lot better and that this is not tolerable. And so, more power to them. Like, if that's the decision they have to make, that's the decision they have to make. But um, many people can make it work with what they have if they stop idealizing marriage, and having unrealistic expectations.
Hmm. So when it comes to the situation of your honeymoon, that was an isolated incident. And if a person can earlier on catch that and then, as you say, almost coach yourself internally, that's great. But for some people, they've been in that conflict for maybe years. And is that possible in your experience? What you've seen is have you seen situations where there can be a turnaround with years of that type of conflict and friction?
What I've seen is that some people will, but again, it's got to do with how they think about it, will replace the resentment and the irritation and the frustration that they may have felt in the early years of the marriage, and will replace it, and will end up having a sense of humor about it, and will end up having a sense of acceptance, and like, that this is just how my partner is, like, I'm not going to change them, and I accept this about them. And um but what I've seen is that it's very, very difficult for people to change who they are completely. Like, it's very difficult for somebody who does not want to be around animals and does not enjoy it, to all of a sudden, to force themselves to start to be okay with it. What has to change is that the partner has to be able to look at something like that that's fundamentally different from who they are, and just have compassion towards that difference, and understand that it's not the end of the world, you know? It really, I don't know how to emphasize this enough. It really is in how you talk to yourself in your own head. So much of marriage is how you process things. And and that's why I often say that Shaitan he's always trying to attack marriages, and he's always trying to convince you that what you don't have is good enough, and and something better is actually somewhere else, you know?
About processing in your head, let's look at that a bit further. What helps with that? Would you say that it's the marriage books that are helpful? And by the way, Hina does have a list of marriage books, and I'll link that, which I hope everyone will find very useful. Yeah, I mean, is it going to be, because for example, what if there are people out there who have not seen positive, healthy, thriving marriages modeled to them, right?
Yeah,
Almost like they're coming into this new and having to constantly analyze everything all the time, which can be
yeah,
exhausting. Are they
yeah,
relying on, is it suhba? Are there books? Is it spiritual rearing? If you could comment.
yeah. Yeah, I think it's a combination of all of that. I think having for women to have female scholars and female mentors in marriage is very important. People who've made their own marriages work, people who've kind of seen it all and have some wisdom and some experience under their belt. I think people like that are very important to have in your life. Um, and have somebody who knows you and isn't just going to tell you, yeah, you go girl, you know, like everything you do is right and he's the problem. Somebody who's going to get you to look at your own flaws and mistakes and talk to you honestly and critically about what you need to do to change, and somebody that you respect enough that you'd be willing to hear them. I think that's very, very important to have a mentor in marriage. I was very blessed in that I had friends who were walking this road with me and who were able to um, talk to me about things they noticed that I needed to work on, but they were also able to tell me the things that they appreciated in me that they were learning from, you know? So it was like a process of us helping each other. Yeah, and then therapy, if I, you know, people shouldn't underestimate the power of having an objective outside voice, you know, listening to both of you and hearing your perspectives and then helping you to communicate with one another, you know? Um, if your marriage is really struggling and you're not happy, then a person should give it their all, and that will often include going to therapy, but both partners have to be willing. So many times I've seen that one is like, no, I'm not doing therapy, you know.
Okay. And
uh,
I just spoke to a therapist the other day, and he was saying that he said, Sumaya, I can't tell you how many times I see these couples in my office, and they always come too late. Like it's already done when they walk in. And he's saying
yeah,
they're not coming in for therapy early on when they can really tackle things,
yeah,
find tools and develop, build from the, yeah.
yeah, yeah. It's we need help understanding each other, right? And we need help hearing each other. And your the therapist who's told you that is spot on. It's true. So many times you'll hear about a divorce happening in the community and it's a total shock, and people will feel take it upon themselves to try to talk to the person and say, you know, don't do this, why are you doing it, but you guys are so great, and you can just tell from the person's face that they checked out a long time ago. Like, we're hearing about it now, and so people think they can help and they can advise, but that person, you know, the marriage was over a long time ago. We're just only hearing about it now, you know. So yeah, you're absolutely
Yeah,
right.
that's very true, because that's why when there's a divorce, there's generally one party who's suffering more than the other, because in the stages of grief, the person who has initiated the divorce has already checked out. So he or
Yeah,
she has already been through those first stages.
yeah,
So then the other person's like, how can you be so unfeeling and so
yeah,
cold?
yeah,
Whereas this has been a long process. There's already been
yeah,
like, all is up. I've been done for a while. Khalas.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
You've mentioned a lot about the importance of gratitude and how that has really been a blessing in your marriage and the positive marriages that you've seen. Could you talk a bit about how does one be grateful when things are really not so great? And I think you also mentioned the importance of Salatul Shukr and
Yeah.
how frequently you think a person should do that.
I've talked to a lot of young women who recently got married, and one tool that many of them have told me that they've been doing, which I think is beautiful, and something I think would behoove all of us to do, is to keep a gratitude journal. Just like every day in the morning, the first thing after you get up and you've done your, prayers and whatnot, and your aura, and you've started your day, to just sit down and write down 5 things that you're grateful for. And it could be, it could be something as simple as like the salt in my food. I'm grateful that I have salt in the cabinet with which to season my food. Allah loves to be thanked for the simplest, minutest things, and the more we thank him, the more he increases us. And so I think part of gratitude is just realizing that everything that is coming your way and that is happening in your life was tailor made for you by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's coming from the divine and it's coming for a reason. And so the question to always ask is, what am I supposed to be learning from this? And why am I being tested in this way? Like, why is it not easy for me the way it is for my sibling or my best friend or my neighbor or whoever? But I had a friend who she said, a loving marriage. I really like this quote of hers. She said, a loving marriage can be one of the greatest spiritual gyms out there. And I'd never heard of marriage being referred to as a spiritual gym, GYM. And I was like, that's such a great description, because that is literally what marriage does. It forces you to stretch, it forces you to grow, it forces you to be uncomfortable. There's going to be times you're going to be sore and you're going to be in a little bit of pain, but it's going to be worth it. And yeah, just realizing, having big intentions and realizing that I am going to be challenged, but that's where the growth is going to come from as well. And I'm not going to be the same person at the end of my life that I was when I went into my marriage, um, because of how much I'm going to grow and change throughout this marriage. I know somebody who left her marriage because she said she didn't like who she was becoming. She said that she tried every tactic under the sun, every advice she was given, she followed to like try to make her marriage work. And she had an abusive husband. And so she said, when she was told, be submissive, do whatever he says, give in to everything he's, says, and then one day he'll be eating out of the palm of your hand. She's like, I tried that. That didn't work. Then she was given the advice that be a spitfire, and don't take nonsense from him at all, and let him know who's boss. And even that kind of worked for a little bit, but she didn't like who she was becoming, because it wasn't her nature. It wasn't her nature to be aggressive. It wasn't her nature to be a spitfire. And she was like, I don't like who I'm becoming. And at the end of my life, I don't want to be this brash woman who has a chip on her shoulder, who's always getting into arguments and fights with people, because that's how she's had to live her marriage, in order to get what she needs. And, her quality of life went down significantly after she got divorced. Um, but she said that at the end of the day, she's like, I'm in this tiny bedroom in my parents' house and I barely have room to maneuver. She's like, I've got little kids that I have to figure out how to provide for. She's like, but at the end of the day, I go to bed and I don't have somebody in my ear making me miserable. And I don't wake up frightened and being nagged by somebody who's making me miserable. And to her, that was worth it. Alhamdulillah.
I mean, as you said, when it comes to an abusive situation, then unless the
Absolutely.
user is willing to make dramatic changes, then there's actually no
Yeah.
future.
Yeah. Alhamdulillah, what the statistics have shown me and the professional advice that I've heard given, usually abusive situations don't get better. So we like to convince ourselves, that we can change a person, but uh, usually they say the abuse ends because the wife gets killed, or the husband becomes incapacitated because he has a heart attack, or he gets chronically ill, terminally ill. Like, only at that point does the abuse end. Otherwise it carries on for decades, unfortunately.
So I've got a question, and many women have brought this up. I've seen it myself. Since I was a child, we've always seen little marriage books there about how to be a good wife and what a woman should do. And why is it that so much of marriage advice tends to be geared towards women and we see very little towards men? And then even when it comes to, for example, saving the marriage, it's like this responsibility is on her shoulders. Like she carries the weight to create a peaceful marital home, and somehow she's responsible for saving it when things are going downhill.
It's interesting. I actually feel that we tend to see what we want to see, and I've noticed that a lot of people are also very um they're very defensive. And I like, for example, that marriage talk that I gave the other day, one of the things I said at the beginning is that this talk is geared mainly towards women. And um because this talk used to be given at dua parties, which were for these young brides and their friends. So a lot of the advice is geared towards women, but I've tweaked it a little bit to like address it towards men as well. But try to resist, I told the women, try to resist thinking, well, what about the men? Why are you just talking to us? And to the men I said, try to refrain from automatically being like, aha, see, are you listening? This is for you. You need to change. Like, everybody should be coming at this from the angle of like, what do I need to do to make my marriage work, right? Despite that caveat and that qualifier, there were so many comments that came in about like, well, what about the men? Why men can't change, and why are always the women expected to, and why, like, that immediately, that was how many women took it. And then many men made the comments like, oh, women are feminists and women can't change, and most women aren't willing to do what it takes to make a marriage work. And it's just really interesting because people are so big on making these blanket statements and always pointing the finger at the other instead of pointing the finger at themselves and thinking, okay, what do I need to work on? So that's one thing, because I have noticed that uh, the knee-jerk reaction often tends to be, why are you talking to me? Why not the other person? On both sides. The other thing is, I don't know if people actually realize the power that they have and the amount of control they actually do have in their own marriages, and what strengths and gifts that they bring to the table if only they were willing to utilize those gifts and harness them. And so um, the truth is that a woman can make or break the environment in her home, and the man can as well. Absolutely. There's no doubt about that. It takes two to build a home. The woman, as far as making her home an environment that the husband wants to return to every single day, right? And he isn't looking outside the home to get what he needs. And the husband, what he brings to the table is first providing for a home, and also making the home peaceful, in that when the garage door opens and he's coming home, the wife and the children aren't cowering and worried that, oh, dad's going to walk in the door now and everything's going to change. Like, the whole mood in the house is going to change now, which has been the reality for many people as well, unfortunately. It should be that when the dad comes home, everybody's excited and happy to see him and relieved that he's coming home and safely. And like, I'll give you an example. I'll give you one example. I know a couple that they're a beautiful couple and they're very, happy, and alhamdulillah, they have a successful marriage and they have beautiful children and whatnot. But there was, the husband took my husband into confidence once and said that, he had this like hour and a half long commute to his work and back, and he's the one who worked. The wife was home with the kids, and they had multiple children, and it was stressful raising the kids and whatnot. But he told my husband that he would get in the car to come home, and the wife would call him while he was on the drive home to complain about the kids and to complain about the situation and how hard her day had been, and would tell him what she needed from him pretty much the second he walked in the door. And so he told my husband that there were times that he wished he could just miss his exit and not go home. And he said, I just want to keep driving. And he once even joked about how, like, yeah, I see why some men go to a bar, you know, and he's like, I need to find me. He actually joked, he's like, I need to find me a Sufi bar where I can go and pour myself a tall glass of liquor before I go home, you know. And but basically, what he was saying is like he needed to fortify himself before he came home to be able to deal with what was going on there, and that was actually very sad because I don't think the wife realized like what she was doing to him and how he was making him feel about coming to his own home, right? So I think that's where that advice comes from. It also comes from a time when the wife did stay home with the kids and the husband was out working. Things have changed. Many times the wife is out working as well too now and is coming home and also needs that domestic bliss, also wants to come home to a clean home and a peaceful home as well. But traditionally, it was always understood, and in many parts of the world, it is still this way that the wife is home, you know, nurturing the kids, raising the kids, and maintaining the home front. And the husband is the one out there working and providing and paying the bills so that there can be a home. And everybody, one role isn't more important than the other, and one role isn't more valued than the other. They each work together to make a cohesive home, to make a peaceful home. And if only we could realize how valuable the work we do is, right? And not feel like, you know, my work is nothing and it's not worth anything. And I want what, you know, the for the wife to think that I want what the husband is doing because that's more valued. And the husband to be thinking, well, the wife doesn't really work, you know, she's what she's doing isn't as important as what I'm doing. I mean, that's very unfortunate. But when both partners realize that what they're doing is so important and so necessary, that's when, inshallah, um, you can find success, you know?
I think that's why these conversations are important because both parties do need to hear it, and also possibly with premarital counseling as well.
Yeah.
We value, because we're seeing more and more in this culture that being, for example, a stay-home mother and wife is looked down upon when it's actually quite a very noble role.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It really bothers me when people ask a at home mom, do you work? It's like, yes, she does. And the work never ends, you know? So, yeah.
So, Hina, when is a marriage worth saving?
I would say that a marriage is worth saving when there's children involved. I just feel like, unless there's physical abuse, that's just from the get go. Like, but other than physical abuse, if there's any way to save a marriage when there's children involved, um, I would say just give it your all. And I came to that decision or that point of view after reading a book, which I recommend everybody who's thinking about maybe ending a marriage to consider reading. It's called um, The Unexpected Legacy of Divorce. And it was this landmark study that this woman did where she followed a group of families for 25 years and she met up with them every 5 years to see how they were doing. And she followed different groups. There was a group that the parents were unhappy, but they stuck together for the sake of the children. The parents were unhappy and they decided to split. The parents were happy and they made it work. And then so these were the different groups she followed. And I won't go into the details of what the study revealed, but I really think it's worth looking into before making the final decision. But if children are involved, I think it's really worth um, putting your own needs and your own desires on the back burner and doing whatever it takes to raise the next generation in a home where they have both their mother and father there to help guide them through life. Again, with the caveat, as long as there's no physical abuse going on in the family.
Mhm.
Um, but alhamdulillah, that's pretty much, you know, can be feel free to agree or disagree, but that's how I feel about the situation.
Thank you so much. And I will be linking Hina's, she gave a speech which she detailed all of the points that she has gleaned from other people who've had healthy marriages and from her own experience about what has worked to make a marriage flourish. So I will be linking that. And we're going to be transitioning now into the topic of children, because I know that with your experience in being an educator, you have a wealth of information on that. So just so you know who you're talking to, that some of our community are single mothers, some are married, some are not. Some have healthy co-parenting relationships with their ex, and some have a terrible relationship with their ex. And so, given that spectrum, how would you advise that we as mothers work on our relationship with our children to make it a closer bond?
Okay, if I'm addressing this more geared towards single mothers, I can't emphasize enough the importance of community and finding people that you trust and you respect and asking them, actually going out and asking them to invest in your children and to look out for them, and realizing that um, people have their own struggles, their own lives, their own responsibilities, and being mindful of that, and letting people know that you're aware of that, but also clearly laying out what you need from others to help you with raising your children. So it might be that, I need a male figure to help teach my child sports. And so when you go out and you do sporty activities with your kids, could you keep my children in mind, Or if, you go to this vicar gathering that has men there and I have sons and I don't have a present father, for my sons in their life, can you please consider taking my sons with you? Um, I know of a young man here who his parents were both converts, and then his father left Islam. And so his parents got divorced, and his mother was raising him as a Muslim, and she herself was Muslim. But she really reached out to the community and asked everybody to like look out for her son. And, they used dads who would take him on hikes, and people made sure that when they had Eid celebrations that they included them, and that, her kids also got gifts. And even when it's time now to be getting married, like keeping him in mind for like prospective partners that he can be introduced to. So it really does take a village to raise a child. And if you don't have a present father for your children, it's important to find mentors who are, and that can come in any form. It can be a grandfather, it can be an uncle, it can be a yunkle, a young uncle, or we call funkle, fun uncle, somebody from the community, an older brother type figure. But the mom can't be the one to teach it all. And especially, and for girls, you want older sister type mentors, young aunties, because kids, there comes a point where kids can't keep taking from their parents. They the same advice that you want to give, they'll be able to hear it from somebody else better. It's just the nature of this relationship. Um, and so,
On that
yeah,
point, I would like to, though, encourage the community to stand up, really, because for many women, they are in an environment where they do not have family in that environment. And I mean, I would like to see more are other people to be more willing to reach out and say, hey, like, do you need any help with your child or with your son or with your daughter?
absolutely, absolutely. No, the community needs to come together and needs to reach out, especially to children that they see are orphaned or their parents are divorced and they need more support. That's like without a doubt. I want to make sure though that you don't miss the boat waiting for people to show up, right? You sometimes it's just a matter of reaching out and saying, look, it's going to be easy to overlook us. It's going to be easy to not notice us because you're busy with your own lives. But I'm just putting this out there that I need you to have us on your radar. And that can make the difference between somebody remembering you and somebody not, right? And so for the sake of our children, we have to be willing to do that. Like we have to be willing to humble ourselves, we have to be willing to be vulnerable, we have to be willing to put ourselves out there, because I also see what happens is people become bitter uh about how nobody was there for them, and the community meanwhile is like, I had no idea. They should have, absolutely they should have. but
Mhm.
it's just the way it is. People end up being very like, I don't want to use the word narcissistic, but we can
Just
be a little self.
absorbed in their own lives.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
have their own children and family
yeah,
and everything going on.
yeah. No, I mean, I've had people tell me very seriously, like, I need you to look out for my kid. I need you to. We can't do it all. Absolutely can't do it all, but we can make choices that, like, and remember people, and and do dua for them, and reach out to other people and say, hey, keep this person in mind, and like I said, it takes a village, but the village has to be aware of what's going on too, right? And that's going to require us keeping our eyes and ears open and our radars up, our antennas up, but it's also going to require people being willing to reach out and saying, hey, I need help.
Any other meaningful tips? I mean, tips that will engender this meaningful, close relationship with the child?
Well, there's different stages of life, and all the different stages of life require, different tips and tricks. Uh, I would say now that my kids are older, one of the things I realize, and I wish I had known then, and I'm grateful for whatever little I did do at that time, but I wish I had realized more the value of it, is just the value of building positive memories and traditions. Um, it goes by so quickly, and then one day, all of a sudden, overnight, these are just your children's memories. And so things like, having a tradition for what you do on Eid morning, how you make that special, how you make it special when they finish reading the Quran or when they memorize surahs. Um, Very soon it'll be your kids talking about, this is what my parents did for me when I was little, and you're just like, whoa, when did that happen? Like, I thought we were still in that process, but we're not anymore. These are now memories. So building positive memories, um, really they say in parenting, the days are long, but the years are short. And it's so true. Like, the day-to-day minutia can drag us down, and it might be hard to like want to hear every story that your child is saying, or like letting them, stay up to get that extra hug or that extra kiss. But now I have regrets about that, wishing I had been more present, wishing that I had enjoyed that time more, when I was in the thick of it. And I know the elders used to say that, enjoy this time, it's going to go by fast. It's cliche, but it's so true. So just, taking the time out to make your kids your priority when they want to talk to you. Because now it's true. I chase my kids, asking them to give me time. And there was a time when they were always at my beck and call, always hanging around me, wanting to be with me. So, um, yeah. Yeah, and then, if you have it in you to journal and to record stories about your kids, because you think you're going to remember these stories always, the little funny things they say, and those cute reflections that they have and whatnot, but they're going to forget them, and you're going to forget them. So it's really nice to have them recorded somewhere and then to share it with them when they're older. Um, and I really loved this one quote that I think Toni Morrison said. She said, every child wants to see that when they walk into a room, their parent lights up. Every child wants to see that. Every child is looking for, when I walk in and my parent sees me, how do they react? And so, for many of us, we're like, oh, your clothes aren't proper, or you're messy, or your hair is undone, or whatnot. All we look at all the things that need to be improved, but really just thinking about like how, looking at the situation through your child's eyes and seeing that your kid, when they come into your presence, they should feel that you are just super excited and super thrilled to have them around.
It's a great point. You reminded me of a few years ago, I actually created a photo book, but inside I created personal poems for my child on different topics. And I printed it and I printed it. I noticed that now, years later, whenever somebody comes to visit, then he'll take the book and show, this is what my mom wrote. She made this book.
Oh,
And so even though it just seemed more of a passion project for me, I
yeah,
realized something that's actually quite precious to him.
yeah.
Okay, those are really great tips. So What I wanted to move into, because I've heard you speak about this before, and especially for everyone with sons, it's such a huge topic, which is the topic of pornography. And so many of us in Muslim communities, we kind of like ostriches, where we put our heads in the sand and we think, oh, this is not going to affect our child because we
Yeah.
have a good Muslim community. So you have shared some really shocking stories in another talk that I've heard you say. If you please, I think the community would benefit to hear about that.
Yeah. Yeah, what I say is that it's not a matter of if your child stumbles across pornography, it's a matter of when. And so it really behooves us to be prepared and to be willing to talk about it and to be willing to equip our children with the tools for how to deal. Um, I've had parents ask me, well, when do I talk to my child about pornography? And I ask them, is your child on the internet? And they're like, yes. I'm like, you should have talked to them before they got on the internet, because the the internet the analogy I give that I heard somewhere, which I thought was very appropriate, is they said that the internet needs to be treated like a loaded weapon, needs to be treated like a loaded gun in your home. And you just think about, how would you treat a loaded gun? And whatever rules you have for a loaded weapon in your home, that's the rule you should have for the internet, which is that you don't leave your children alone with it. You teach your children how to handle it in a safe manner. You keep it under lock and key, especially when your kids are younger. You know where it is at all times. You know where your child is around it at all times. So I've had people comment on some of my videos saying, like, this woman is crazy. Like, how long does she think that you can control your kids? And I think it's really important to make it clear that when I gave those specific advices, that was when my kids were young. And so when your children are young, and the most common ages for addiction to pornography are ages 10 to 12.
That's shocking. That is so, I
Yeah,
heard you say that
well,
about incident.
it's the most common. And I've talked to kids and I found out about kids being addicted to pornography. Usually they've stumbled across it at the age of 10, and parents have not known that they've been watching it every day. And, um, and parents will think that, like, our rule was always that the internet has to be used in a public space. Like, you couldn't take it into your bedroom, and at any time any of us could glance over their shoulder and see what they were looking at on their laptops. However, when the smartphones came out, I know of one family that they had similar rules as we did, but they didn't realize that their son was taking the phone into the bathroom and was watching pornography there. So um so the early years, it's a lot about prevention, and it's a lot about teaching your children about what's out there and what they're supposed to do if they ever come across it, and how addictive it can be. Really trying to put the fear of God into them, and the fear of getting addicted and how it affects people, um, how it affects children, how kids want to quit and they're not able to quit. um, Obviously, when they're older, you're not going to be able to control. My son told me that he was at the public library and he saw people from his school watching pornography on the computer. And all the boys were gathered around the computer and were laughing. And the librarian came and was threatening to kick out the kids who were laughing because they were making noise. But the kids who were watching pornography were not in danger of being kicked out. So it's just really messed up. It's really, really messed up. And so that's why we have to teach our kids um, about, how to avoid it, what to do if they ever come across it, why they need to avoid it. And that's a whole other discussion. Unfortunately, there isn't time for that. I do have an article that people can look at if they want, called uh, How to Protect Your Child from the P Word. I think that's what it's called. Protecting Your Children from the P Word. It's on my website. My website is hinakm.com, hinakm.com. You're going to have it linked. So
Okay.
on that website, you can have access to that article.
I remember you said in your talk that even the way you refer to it to a child, you don't have to go into detail, but if you could just quote what you would say.
Yeah, so I just, I think I would change it now, but when my kids were younger, I told them that pornography is something I told them that they try to trick you into watching pornography, and I told them that they'll have clickbaity titles. It might be a title like, for example, we live in the town of San Ramon. It might be a title that'll be like, if your parents knew that this was in the town of San Ramon, they would freak out. So as a kid, you're going to be like, what would freak out my parents? I want to click on this. And then you fall down this rabbit hole. Um, of pornography. And so I told them about the clickbaity titles. I told them that it might happen that you're looking for something on the internet and something pops up on your computer screen and you're like, wait, that wasn't what I was looking for. What is that? And then you start looking into it a little closer, and then you click on it, and then images take over your screen. And so I told them that pornography is this field in which people make movies and videos of naked people doing weird things. Um, that's what worked for our family. I've had other people say they wouldn't use the word weird, they would use other words. Well, figure out what works for you. But I did make it clear that it's naked people and that they're doing inappropriate things. They're doing haram things, and it's things we're not supposed to watch, we're not supposed to look at. But I had no problem using language like Shaitan wants you to watch it, Um, Shaitan would love for you to spend your time looking at things that Allah doesn't want you to look at. Um, I also made it clear to my children that if you ever see something accidentally, that your first glance, you're not taking into account for that. But if you choose to return to it and to look at it again, that is when the angels start recording. So if you choose, if you make the decision to look at something or do something that's prohibited, you're held to accountable. But if it happened by accident, you're not. Allah's very merciful. So, but then at the same time, also teaching them the tools for Toba, that if you do something, like, don't despair. The door to Toba is always open. You always turn to Allah and you ask Him to forgive you. But part of Toba is making the resolution to not return to it. And the person who keeps committing the same sin again and again and again, and keeps asking for forgiveness, but keeps doing it again and again and again, is making fun of their Lord. I was told that was a hadith of Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu. So that's something to think about too. Like, don't make a joke out of tawbah. Allah's looking at your sincerity. And if you call on Him for help, He will help you, and we're all here to help you. Um, also making it clear to the children that you know about it, because many times kids will come across pornography and think that I have to protect my parents from this, that they don't know about this. So you empower them if you let them know that I'm aware of this and I'm telling you about it, so that together we can avoid this. And here are the choices I make. Here are the choices your father makes every day not to deal with this. Um, then it makes the child feel like they're part of a team, right? And that they're fighting this evil together with their family.
What is it that your heart is filled with that you would love to talk about? What is it that you feel strongly about that you can end with a punch?
Yeah, so the number one thing, that if there was nothing else I could communicate to people, I would want to really emphasize the power of dua. The power of dua. And the fact that, so obviously it goes hand in hand. You have to be working hard, you have to be striving, and at the same time you have to be praying for success. And the fact that people are listening to your podcast, or are even trying to get the kind of information they need to be successful, is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants them to succeed, right? The fact that they're out there trying to educate themselves and try to learn more is a sign that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has good intentions for them, has intended good for them. However, at the end of the day, I do want people to realize that it all begins and ends with dua. You have to be calling on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala every step of the way, and realize that He's the one who puts tawfiq in everything. The statistics could be against you. You could feel that you're in a really bad situation, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can turn anything around. And what I find is that when I give that as a number one tip, sometimes I can see people mentally thinking, okay, fine, dua. Yeah, we get it. But really give me the real stuff. Give me the meat. What do I actually need to be
Well,
doing?
they'll say things like, well, all we can do is just make dua.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And but if your knee-jerk reaction is that tell me the good stuff besides dua, then really you need to take a pause and think about like what is my relationship with Allah like? Am I having a constant conversation with him? Do I believe that he can change anything? Do I believe he's there? Do I believe he's listening? On the flip side, the attitude that all we can do is dua, which is like, yeah, I'm not even going to, get in there and like move my arms and legs a little bit to make things happen. That's a very defeatist attitude as well. So we don't want to become complacent. And so the two go hand in hand. You got to strive and you got to struggle, but at the same time, you have to supplicate the entire step of the way. And yeah, duas can make miracles happen. They can move mountains and they can open doors that you didn't even know existed. And I love one of the quotes I love is that the prayer on your lips is a sign of what Allah wants to give you, right? Allah wants to give it to you, and that's why He's putting it on your lips to ask for it. So ask for it, ask for everything, right? But take the time to ask. So
Thank you. It's a wonderful reminder. Thank you so much for being with us, Hina, and I wish you and your family tawfiq, success always.
thank you, Sumaya. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It was a huge honor, and I wish all of your listeners and all of your viewers tawfiq and success and barakah in everything that they do, blessing in everything that they do, and everything that they're struggling for. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make the road ahead easy. And may we always remember that we're just here for a little while, just a short time. And some of us, it looks like we're having an easier time than others, but everybody has their own struggles. Some we see, some we don't. And the goal is to get out of here in safety and to get out of here believing La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, nothing else. And inshallah, we're all going to be reunited. Inshallah, inshallah, Jannatul for those. And don't forget to keep doing dua for that. Dua for Jannatul for those, for yourself, your children, your spouses, your families. And inshallah, may Allah reunite us all there, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam.